And good morning, my beautiful America. Welcome back to the All American Book Club. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to bring over to the show for the very first time special guests, thanks to Great American Media and the powerful partnership we have with Great American Media, Great American Family, Great American Pure Flix. We bring over to the show Mark versus the Mountain. That has been premiered on June the 11th on Great American Pure Flix. So I'd like to introduce you to the former New Mexico gubernatorial candidate, Mark Ronchetti, and along with his beautiful wife, Krysty Ronchetti. They have a powerful story of faith and the intersection of faith and politics in the public square. So we're going to be talking midterms. We're going to be talking faith. We're going to be talking a little bit of everything and seeing what has been happening in our culture. And so I'm so happy to have you guys over the show. Mark, Krysty, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Ian, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's break down a couple things. We have been focusing a lot on America 250, and we're doing it the whole year here at the All American Book Club. And Great American has really run alongside of the show, really wanting to celebrate the topics of America 250, reigniting the power of patriotism and people for understanding what patriotism really is. I will say earlier this week, an NBC poll came out saying 90% Republicans are proud to be Americans, but a very small percentage of Democrats. And as a former candidate for governor, what are your initial thoughts when you hear that in the direction of this nation?
I think your patriotism even can't be contingent upon who the president is. And I think some of that is what's happening. With a party where people look at your own country and say, I'm not proud to be from here. And I think that's incredibly unfortunate. I think there are plenty of Democrats who don't think that way. And I think they've got to take their party back and say, wait a minute, we may not be a perfect country and our history may not be perfect. We all agree to that. But at the same time, there is no country that's brought more goodness to the world, I think, than the United States has. I think we've been blessed by God because of a lot of the faith of the people of this country. I think that can grow on both sides of the aisle, but right now the divide is not good.
Yeah, we're even seeing more and more, polling showing that people are in the Democratic Party are less likely to hang their American flag, which is really sad because that's declined dramatically over the last 25 years. And again, your patriotism should not be linked to who's in office. It should be about our country and what we founded this country on. So obviously we're very patriotic and we have our flag and we wear our flag shirts and we're not going anywhere. We're very proud of America.
So let's talk about really how God got you to right now. You have this amazing show on Great American Pure Flix, but you also went through God calling you to run for office. And I want those who are tuning in to think about this if they're thinking about running, if they feel as though the Lord's leading them. But let's talk about that path to what started with the call and then what happened after, because there are so many emotions and so many things that take place on our faith journey when we're being called to something higher and something greater, knowing that God always wins, but going through it is it's an uphill battle with our battle boots literally on. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I always use the metaphor. I remember when we thought about running, our bedroom sits just off our great room in our house. So I always had this metaphor that I thought about running and then I kind of would back away and be like, gosh, no, I mean, it's such a to run for governor of a state and to win your primary and to go into the general. I mean, this is just a massive thing. You can't even wrap your mind around. So I always would think about it. And that was this metaphor. I peek out of the bedroom and I'd look and God's on the couch going, it's time. And I go, no, it's not. And then I'd run back into the bedroom, hide under the bed and wait another couple of weeks. And I'd get back up and do the same thing 4 or 5 times. And then eventually I couldn't ignore it. And what I felt like was happening was that God had put us in New Mexico, myself in 1999, but Krysty eventually joined me in 2006. And it was one of those things where it's sort of been a love affair with the state. We love this state. And you think to yourself, what do you want to do? And God just opened those doors to run. But as I said, and as we talk about on the show, he never said you get to win. And if he did, I would have told everybody. I would have been like, listen, God said I get to win. And he never said that ever. But that walk, and the walk for both of us in our marriage with our girls, was an incredible journey that I can't even put into words. And I don't even know what fully God is going to do with it going forward. What do you, I tell the girls this all the time. You go through something and it doesn't work. Well, you don't know what God's got in step 2 and 3 and 4.
Exactly.
And there are people that you run into along the way that you can help. And this, we wouldn't be sitting here with you right now talking about Mark versus the Mountain had we not run. I know that for a fact. So we're blessed to do that. And I think Krysty's toughness in this whole process and basically saying, look, we're going to do what we're going to do. And I could not have chosen a better partner for this because she's unbelievable. And it's been, even for the two of us, it's bonded us more together, I think.
Yeah. And I think, the hard thing out there, if there's people out there that are thinking about maybe potentially running for office and how important it is to have Christian voices out there and being represented in the public square, I believe in that wholeheartedly. And so initially, Mark's this very popular chief meteorologist with weatherman for 20 years, where people love him. And our running joke in the family was, everybody loves the weatherman and nobody likes a politician. So
right.
It was really hard to kind of say, okay, this is a big risk for you, because automatically, you can assume maybe 50% of your the people that love you on TV, given the weather, may not love you when you announce your run for office. And that was a big risk. So I have to say, I was really nervous about us doing it. It took a lot of prayer. It was not something that we took lightly. And then in that process of him running, I actually read through Mark Batterson's book called Draw the Circle. I don't know if you know that book, but I'm a big fan of that book about, you don't really know what God's going to prepare you for. And it might not be happening right in that moment that you think it's going to happen, but you continue to pray over the same things each time. And you journal those prayers. And my journal from those the year and a half of us running for governor are some of the best revelations from God, and just his wisdom and his protection, and just knowing he never left our side, even if it didn't go the way we wanted it to. So
yeah, absolutely. Mark Batterson is one of my favorite pastors in DC. I was in DC as a young staff member when he first started the church. And one of my friends who got married were one of the first couples he ever married. That is how long he has been there. Wow. And yeah, just very powerful. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about the show. I mean, I could talk politics all day with you guys. We will, if you let me. Let's talk about the amazing aspect of Great American. How did that whole process come? How did they seek you out? And now you have this show, and you have all these people that you're impacting. Entertainment without compromise. How did that all come to be for you guys?
Well, excuse me, once the race ended, we kind of thought, what next? And that's one of the most difficult conversations you ever have with your kids.
Yes, it
is when you say, hey, we're going to take this huge risk, and it doesn't work, and then they look at you like, Dad, what are we doing here? And so we had to kind of try to figure that out. So we wanted to sort of walk down two different aisles in a way. So the political portion of what we do, we're still there. You don't let that sort of thing go. And so we have avenues where we talk about politics, but then we wanted to do something when there was no politics involved. And we had done a show. We'd done the original Mark versus the Mountain locally in New Mexico in 2019. So we built the highest house ever in the state of New Mexico. We documented it for the CBS and Fox affiliates here in Albuquerque, and then ran a 20-episode show with those half-hour episodes. So we love doing that. Krysty does design. I love the meteorology portion where we're high on a mountainside. How do we put the house? How does it all work? And so we did that. We loved it. And I had this 20-episode show. Well, we had a friend we met along the campaign. Her name was Hillary Kitzman. And she reached out to me, and we ended up having a discussion about, what are you going to do and everything else. And she's an editor, and her dad is a legend in the business. He's actually done a bunch. Squire Rushnell is his name, and he's a legend. He does stuff with Great American. He does stuff with all sorts of different outlets. And so she said, hey, let me see this thing. And as we take a look, she cut a trailer for me and we started shopping it around. Well, we got some interest from some really big groups, but the problem I had with it was that they didn't fit necessarily what our values were going to be, and they weren't bad. Like one was Fox Business, we had a great discussion with them, but it was just in there were some other news organizations that were thinking about it. But then Hillary mentioned, hey, what about Great American? And then I looked into what they were doing. You talk about Bill Abbott and the great work that he does, and talking about somebody who is not compromising. He's a great example of that. And so we get introduced to them, and Joshua Moore does their programming, and we had a great discussion with him. And then we just started down a road with them where we just had more and more discussions where it was like, hey, we can talk about exactly what we want to talk about. We can talk about our faith. We can talk about a show that means a lot more than just putting a house on a mountainside. It's about how your family reacts to challenges. It's about how God impacts your life. And it's about how your marriage tries to survive regular buildings. And then of course, at the end of it, we sell the house and then we start to build another one.
Yeah. And I think also a big key takeaway for me when we met with Great American was Joshua started the meeting in prayer and then he ended our meeting in prayer. And to me, I was like, well, this is the right partner for us because, for a long time, with Mark being on television as a weatherman, you definitely could get a vibe that he was a believer and a Christ follower, but he really couldn't openly share his faith. And once he ran for governor, I mean, there was not a moment that he didn't talk about his relationship with God, because I think at the end of the day, right, it's not about us. It's not about what we achieve here on television or in a house build or in a governor's race. It's what we can do to tell people about Christ and about why you want to follow him and why God's got your back and how important that your time is with him. And so I think any opportunity we have that we can share that is great. It's a God moment, and that's what we were looking for, and that's what Great American provided.
I had this conversation with Bill the other day, but I said to him, I can't cook, and he knows that. My husband does all the cooking, thank God. But we watch the Food Network, and we've been watching Barbecue Brawl. But I said to Bill, I'm getting so tired of the agendas that continue to be pushed, even watching Food Network and the cooking shows. And I said, I'm glad that you are bringing more lifestyle components like yours to the space, because we need, where else are we going to go? And that's what Bill said. He's like, where are you going to go? I said, well, thankfully I can watch my husband cook and maybe learn something from him or pick up a book because I love to read. But I said, at the end of the day, what are we doing for our nation's backyard when we don't have these safe spaces for our kids to be able to sit down and not have to worry that they're going to see something that they really should not be seeing, or we shouldn't even be watching, right? But as you are putting together the show, and as we see what's happening in our backyard, what are other things that you want to just say to the parents out there? A call to action, a calling card to those who are listening to say, let's not give up hope, but what are ways that you have been able to navigate because of what you are doing with Great American to better the community?
I just think, as a parent, first and foremost, I mean, obviously, I think speaking to any parent out there, you're always trying to watch what your kids are absorbing, who their friends are. I believe, kids are kind of the makeup of the 5 people they spend the most of their time with. Or what are they watching? What's influencing them? Where are they? And I hate to say this, it's no different when you're an adult. If you are surrounded by negativity, or if you're surrounded by division or constant agendas being pushed your way to normalize it, right? To make you feel like you're the bad guy because you're not aligning this, and instead saying, what does scripture say about this? And how do I align myself with still love and still being loving and being kind and being thoughtful, but ultimately knowing that your answers come directly from scripture, and that's how you're trying to live your life. So when we're given an opportunity to say, hey, there is a need for faith-based content. We believe that wholeheartedly. Even in politics, I mean, it goes back and forth. Like,
yes, it does.
They're tied for us. That removing God from this country, removing God from politics, removing God from the classroom, removing God from our entertainment. That's where we start to see these big gaps and these big holes in people's identity and what they're trying to fill. They're trying to fill this void, right? And that hole is made for God. And I think when we try to replace it with other things, it's a major loss. And so we're trying to make a small contribution and offer up really faith-based, authentic programming. And we are exactly who we are. So there's not like we're not actors. We can't even pretend to act like we're terrible actors. So as much as Mark wants to be in one of those Christmas movies on Great American.
Oh yes. Are you going to do a walk on?
Hold on a second. Now we've got like a little general store in it. How can I not be the guy running the general store when the couple comes in, they kind of don't know each other very well or something, and I just kind of help bring them together, maybe just a line or two. I mean, I'm not talking about a lot here, but I think it can happen.
Yeah, you know what? I have been vying to be. I don't know if you guys know Shay Robbins, A Christmas Prayer 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I adore her, know her so well, and I want to be the best friend. I want to be the walk-on best friend for any of her movies. But it just really. But the thing is, when we see faith, family, freedom in our TV, in our movies, you're inspiring. You're inspiring the spirit that God has placed in you. You're inspiring and reigniting that belief in patriotism, freedom, liberty, all of those things that the demonic is trying to really remove from this nation, which we cannot. Yeah. So we have just a little under 3 minutes left. And I wanted to ask, I wanted to highlight two things. I have written articles on the fact that the American dining room table has carried our spirit through all these years. And I'm glad to see, as you guys are building, that there's a dining room, that there's a focal point of sitting together around the table, which I feel as though it's been removed from our culture, which is, I think, a downturn. And if we need to be back at the dining room table, we need to be back praying together. We need to be eating together and removing ourselves from anything but each other.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that point, I think it's a very good one. Look, when people talk about a spiritual battle, I think oftentimes there's this easy reflective move to, oh my gosh, where's Satan and his little cloven hooves and his little tail, and oh, here he comes. Da, da, da. No. What that is this is the issue right here. Oh, sorry, hold on. This is the issue, right?
Yeah, and I always hold it up. It's right here.
The distraction is the weapon, right? And so therefore, if you're sitting there with your kids and you're at dinner and they're like this on their phone and everybody's on their phone, you see it every single time you go out. And it is not something that is overt, it's something that's covert. And as it happens, you lose that moment and you lose that time. And we always tell the girls two things. One, don't wish away time. Don't wish you were older. Trust me, it doesn't get better than it is right now. When those meals show up and you get whatever you want, man, that's the best. Okay? So don't wish away time. And at the same time, don't let distraction take you out of the moment. And I think that's exactly what we want to be able to do. But I will say this too, one other thing that is so important to us, we have to produce programming that is compelling, that people have to want to watch. We have to do that. And I think part of our, the journey on Mark versus the Mountain in season 1 is when we started shooting this, we didn't know what we were doing. We set up a production company to do this and we don't know what's going on. I mean, let me just be honest about this, okay? So the first few episodes, you're like, what the heck is happening here? And then slowly we figure it out by the end. And we've talked to Great American Family and we're going to go with season 2. And I think what you're going to see is an evolution in a show. It's like watching the first episode of Seinfeld. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get it, so that's what we're hoping for. But at the end of the day, people watch it and stick with us a little bit and realize that it's got a lot more to it than just building a house. And then our goal is to make sure that we provide something that can bring a family together. And you're exactly right. Sitting down together, having those moments together is so important.
Well, and I would just add, in my design, if you notice in my design, in that dining room table, right, we have kind of a little bit of a battle. There's no television. I didn't put a television in the right room.
Right.
I still disagree with you.
Mark, where do we watch the Dallas Cowboys? Where do we watch the football game, right? And I'm like, well, you can have that later in your, some other place in the house.
man cave. He needs a man cave. There you go.
Exactly. But I'm like, I want people to connect, especially when they're in the mountains and you're taking time away from the busyness of your life, is a time to connect. And we try to do that with our own kids. And I, as a parent, it's hard. And I relate to that very much, that you are competing with friends, you're competing with their sports, you're competing with their schooling, and you're competing with their phone. And it is an ongoing challenge. And so I think it's that natural step of saying, hey, let's all at least have dinner. And can you help me make this meal with us? And then let's sit down and let's have a little bit of a communication. And I think it's so important. And it's something that we pray about individually. We pray as a couple, like, help us protect our family unit, like help us connect and find that real connection with our own kids.
Yes. Well, I mean, I remember Ronald Reagan saying the most important conversations happen at the dining room table. And I always said when I was on the Hill, on Capitol Hill and in the White House, the most important conversations are not on the Senate floor, are not an executive order, but they come from our homes that then impact the community, not the government.
Yep.
And so I am thankful that you guys are making that impact. Congratulations on season 2. I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to see what God has next in store for you guys. You guys are amazing, but you continue to you raise the flag of patriotism and of faith. And we need that more than ever before as we are celebrating America 250. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Great to be with you.